In this video, we're putting our design skills to the test by creating 3 different package designs for potato chips. We'll only have 5 minutes to design the first one, 30 minutes for the second, and the last one will get our best effort with no time constraint whatsoever. Each package will share the same information, and we're going to go for a higher end, natural, healthy looking style. Alright guys, let's get started. So here's our blank package. Just to save some time, I've gone ahead and typed out the information that's going to go on the package. And I've also gone ahead and gathered a small collection of fonts to use for this, because I just don't think I'd have time to find them from scratch. So without further ado, let's start the clock in 3, 2, 1, go. To kick things off, we'll start out by putting the kettle chips word on here. We'll break that up into 2 words just so we can make it really big. Get that situated, make it larger. Now we can put the flavor on here. It's going to be sea salt and herbs, and that'll go maybe somewhere down here underneath. And then we'll put potato chips, and we just have to legally put that on there so people know what the product is, along with the net weight. And then of course, these are using all natural ingredients, so that'll go somewhere down here as well. And the logo for the brand is Black Pot, and so I'll stick this right up here. And then we just need some fonts. So I'm gonna use something a little bit elegant, organic, something like that for the kettle chips title. And for this, we'll use something a little less ornate. These 2 guys down here will use something very plain, just kind of out of the way. Now we need an image of a potato chip, so I'm gonna use Adobe Stock to find that. And just so you know, you can get 10 Adobe Stock images for free by using the link in the description. Just wanna find something that's kind of like a small little cluster. We'll go with these guys and license that. All right, we can drag that in and put it on top of the bag. I don't really have time to cut the chips out or mask them, so I'm gonna leave the background of the bag white. Just scoot these maybe under here, raise this up. And just to make sure this isn't too plain, I wanna put a little bit of a texture back here. So I'm gonna go back to Adobe Stock and look for a speckle texture. I think something like that'll work, so we'll grab that. Now, unfortunately, I hit a bit of a snag here. The texture got downloaded as an AI file, but when I exported it, it came out at a super low resolution. I didn't have time to resize it and then re-export it again, so I went back and downloaded a JPEG version instead, and all of that cost me just over a minute of time. I'll just drop that in there and kind of size it up to where it fits most of the bag. Get that masked out. I don't know if that looks good or not, but we're gonna go with it. Hopefully I can just maybe resize these a little bit better here. Don't have time to make too much of a logo, so we're just gonna slap a font on this bad boy. And lastly, we'll just align this text so it's nice and centered, and I pretty much think that's it. So if this doesn't win a design award, there's something deeply wrong with the world. But honestly, it's not that bad. It's got a decent layout, but I guess the biggest downfall really is not being able to mask out those chips so we could change the background color. Because in the end, plain white is just kind of boring. All right, here we are, ready for round 2. Let's hope we can do a little bit better than last time, because our clock is starting in 3, 2, 1, go. First thing I want to do is start out with the background and get something that actually has some color in it. So we'll head back onto Adobe Stock and search for some type of canvas texture. I think this one will actually work pretty good, so let's go for that. And we'll just place that on the background like so. And on this one, I really want to use some type of accent color to make sure people know that this is the sea salt and herb flavor. So I'm thinking some type of green maybe. And we can make kind of a half and half look by leaving the top the canvas color and making the bottom green. I'm gonna go back and find a slightly better picture of potato chips. So after spending way too long looking for those, I finally found this one and I like it quite a bit. So I'll just stick these on here and I'm gonna convert it to a smart object. Then we can go in and properly mask these out. Quick select subject to get us most of the way there. And then I can just go in and touch up some of the edges. Then we can just shrink those down and adjust some of our positions here. I want a little more arc off of this, so I'm just gonna squish it in a bit. And now we can put this flavor text on there, nice and big. And I think we can make that match the canvas color up top. Let's stick the kettle chips right back up here. And I actually kind of like that font that I used on the first package, so I'm just gonna do that again here. But this time, since the chips are actually cut out, I can stick the letters behind them. Let's give this guy a better font, something like that maybe. Go ahead and get our potato chips and the net weight text down here. So it's kind of starting to shape up, but I want a little more texture here on this green part especially. So I'm gonna see if I can find some type of like textured circle. This middle one I think will work perfectly. All right, so we'll just take that and stick it in here and replace our circle with it. And we can hide these little white bits by setting the blending mode to multiply. Now I just need to change that color to more of the green tone we had earlier. I do want to remove some of this texture down here because it's a bit much. So we'll just go in here and paint some of that away. Now we can come in and give these potato chips a little bit of a shadow. I'll just do that by hand, painting those in. And now one thing I definitely want to put on this package that the last one didn't have is some type of image of the sea salt and herbs. So we'll just find some herbs here. And one thing I like to do if I don't necessarily want to buy a stock image and want to test it first is I'll just take a screenshot of it, paste a lower resolution version onto the package, and then see how that looks. Obviously it's a little bit janky, but normally you can get an idea of if that image is going to work or not. And in this case I think it does, so I'm going to get it, place it in, mask the background out. Then we can just shrink those down. And I really only want to use the ones here in the middle, so I'm going to cut the rest of these out. And we'll stick this little guy over here in the corner just to balance things out some. And now all we need is some salt, and that can be tricky to work with sometimes just because it's a bunch of little white particles normally on a white background. But we'll make the best of it and try to work with these here. Once again, removing the background. We'll try to place these just somewhere around here. We don't want them too big, obviously. And just like before, we'll just come in and erase the ones we don't want. And I think we've got just enough time to give these herbs some shadow. And of course, that'll extend up to the chips. Then we can go ahead and get the all-natural ingredients on here. And I definitely want to separate these elements a little bit, and so maybe we can do a special call out to this text by putting some type of box around it. So I'm thinking we can find some type of textured container to put that in. One of these ought to work. And I think I like this one here. So we can just paste that in and size it up to match our text. Adjust the color, of course. And then I'm gonna make that text all caps and find a better font. That'll work. And I kind of like to make it look like this text is cut out of the container, so I'll just make it green. Some of these things need to be nudged around just a little bit. And of course, we can't forget about the name of our brand. We still don't have time to make a custom logo, so yet again, we'll just use a font. A quick shading around here just to bring some extra focus to our chips. Okay, maybe I went just a little bit over time on that one, but I kind of got carried away and I really just wanted to finish it out. And you know, I think it turned out pretty good. Obviously, this is a huge step up from our first design. This big green dash we've got here adds an enormous amount of visual interest. And the extra little details like having the herbs and the salt really help show the flavor of the chips so much better. It's interesting that such a little bump in the time led to such a massive improvement. So I can't wait to see how our last design turns out since we have no time limit whatsoever. And we are finally on to the last package. And on this one, I'm gonna give myself unlimited time, so as much time as I want to take on it to make it perfect, that's what I'm gonna do. So one of the biggest changes I want to make on this version is instead of having the chips in a pile where you can see it from the side like here, I instead want to show them from a top-down view. I think something like this should be perfect. Just rotate that into place, and like always, we're just gonna get rid of the background. And I'll come in here by hand and mask out these chips. And I actually liked the wooden platter that these were setting on originally, so why not just add in a wooden background of my own? And then I'll just grab some of these extra potato chips from the previous image, and then we can just place them along the edges, kind of like they're scattering off from this bigger pile. Then we'll get our title on here. I'm gonna shift these down so I can put the flavor text right here. At this point, I started experimenting with bending the text to fit around the chips. I actually really liked the idea, so I jumped over into Illustrator, made a circle path to type the text onto, tightened up the spacing between the letters, and placed it back into Photoshop. I'll also turn the title white and stretch that out a bit. Then I'm just gonna make some of these shapes a little more unique. So back into Illustrator we go. And my main goal here is to just slightly adjust some of the letter shapes to help make this font feel a bit more interesting. I did take a turn down a very wrong road at one point, but quickly came to my senses and settled on a more subtle approach. Here you can see the before and after. Small touches, but I think they add a lot. Next, I moved on to masking out all the herbs, but much more carefully this time. These guys are actually pretty complex, but a proper mask makes all the difference in the end result. Placing these freshly cut out herbs onto the package was pretty easy. I just made sure to focus most of them around the central chips, and removed any of them that felt too distracting. After that came my favorite part of every project, painting in the shadows. Now most of these ended up being pretty subtle, but somehow they still make a huge difference to me. I did make sure to pay special attention to the ones laying directly on the chips, and then some overall lighting and shading on the chips and leaves themselves brought it all together. Now we can get the salt in here. I've just made a little pile over here that we can copy and paste from, and then put that wherever we want. And we'll ground that salt into the scene with a little drop shadow. And now that our scene is pretty much put together, I'd like to give our title a bit of texture. So I'll use a blend if to cut out the dark parts, and I'll also use a different blending mode just to give it this kind of effect. But that's obviously a little too subtle, so I'll duplicate it and make it a little more visible. And now that is the exact look I'm going for. It kind of looks like these letters are etched out into the wood, which I think looks pretty nice. I'll do something similar to the sea salt and herb tagline, but I'm gonna leave that white just so it's a little more visible from far away. We'll get our potato chips and net weight on here, and we can give those a really light stroke just to ensure that they're legible. I'm going to stick the all natural ingredients text right down here as well. And I really don't want this to be something we just throw away. I want this to be a main focal point because these chips are trying to be healthy, at least as healthy as a potato chip can be. So to help that stand out, I'm going to duplicate our background, resize it to fit around that text. And that way I can basically just make a little board for it to set on. We'll carve out some of these edges so it's not so perfectly smooth and straight. Maybe even take a little chip out of it. We'll just touch up the lighting here and there. Add a small highlight, give this a little texture, make it slightly tan, and finally add some shadow. And last but certainly not least, we can take some time to give our brand name a proper logo. And by proper logo, what I really mean is using a simple pre-made pot illustration along with the steam off another to form a base shape. I could then modify it oh so slightly by giving it some custom handles. And finally, I'll place the name on top of it with a font that's good enough to do the job without too much work. Now we can just stick that on there right around here. Give it a bit of texture, make it the same color as the kettle text. All right, so I actually think this looks pretty good, but it kind of does bother me that the brand is Black Pot and there's no black on the package at all. And to be honest, I actually really liked this half and half color scheme that we had going on in the last package, because I think that provided a really good sense of contrast. So I think I'm gonna make some changes. So I'm gonna make a rounded shape here for the bottom of the package, and then use that shape to mask out the wood, turn all of our text up here wide again, and then I just wanna make this board look a little more like a wooden platter. So I'm gonna cut some pieces out of it just so it's not so perfect. And we can duplicate that, drag it up slightly, and then darken it so we can get that 3D edge look. And then a bit of a highlight around the rim should finish it off. And just so we don't make this area too plain, I'll add in a little texture. And then of course we'll wanna apply a little bit of that texture to our letters and to the pot as well. Just a touch of lighting around here to really bring focus to our central text. And finally, I just want to come in here and give some indication like these chips actually have herbs infused within them. And you know, even though they don't look like that much from close up, if you zoom out, it's actually kind of convincing. And so we've arrived at our final result. It's been an enlightening experience, to say the least. We saw a huge bump in quality from the first package to the second, and while I really love the final design, I spent about 9 times longer on it than the second one. And I'm not sure it's 9 times as good. I guess it really just goes to show you that if you have enough time to get a good layout, decent colors, and some great images from Adobe stock, link in the description, you're basically 90% done. It's that last 10% though that takes the majority of the time. Well, that wraps up our design challenge. I hope you guys had a good time. I know I did. If you're in the mood for some more spicy design fun, I recommend you check out this video. And don't forget to smash that like button. And my next video is gonna be something super special. I'm gonna be taking you guys through one of my all-time favorite client projects I had the chance to work on. It's gonna be epic, so if you don't wanna miss that, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And once again, thank you so much for watching, my friends, and I'll catch you in the next one.